All right, good evening, everybody. Welcome to another Expert Advice Live session. I am Tom Agatoli from the Student Doctor Network, here with Dr. Emil Chuck, Director of Advising Services for the Health Professional Student Association. Dr. Chuck, how are you tonight?
Hi, doing well. My cat's doing well too, so I hope you don't mind her interrupting or at least imposing her presence on this call. So thanks so much.
Yeah, mine, if anybody hears a cat yelling from my end, that's my cat. She doesn't like not being allowed in places, even though she chews on everything. All right, so tonight we're going over admissions stuff, everybody's favorite topic. So let's just get right into it. All right, if I'm entering school in 2026, what should I be thinking about now?
Well, we're in the middle of May, so we're in that nice SAT word is liminal, this sort of transitional period where the incoming students and the graduating students all kind of cross over, and then the new application process starts up. So if you're lucky and you have an offer for 2026 coming up in the next few months, clearly what you should be thinking about now is making sure you pay attention to every single deadline your admissions office is telling you to do. So, if you have to send health records, you need to send the health immunization records. If you have final transcripts, that needs to be sent in. Your deposit, your final tuition deposit, hopefully if you need to put that in, the full commitment deposit. All the things that they ask you to do, pay attention to them and just do them. Get it off and get it off any concerns that you have. And this is the period of time to do it. If you happen to involve yourself in moving, if you probably have already signed a lease, you probably have already found a roommate, and you probably want to spend and make sure you spend at least a week or two before the start of orientation so that you're acclimated as well as you can to your new place and your new digs, and enjoy it with your family who's helping you move and so forth from that. So, congratulations if you have an offer. Hopefully it's to a school that you really, really wanted to go to in the first place. And otherwise, just sort of keep yourself, do whatever the admissions team is asking you to do. Relax as much as you can. There's no real need or purpose to be pre-studying for biochem or anything else like that. Everybody will start at the same level no matter what, and there's not really a major advantage for that. Possibly, if you really wanted to, you could probably start talking and asking upperclassmen, at least the second year students, what do they do? You'll get a lot of that during orientation. So don't go crazy too early. I'm sure there's plenty of people to advise you on what to expect in your first year. We have plenty of articles in our SDN archive, our article archive, that can also give you some perspectives. And there's some other posts in our forums that really talk about, advice to you now that you've gotten an offer. Know how to buckle down and study, and that ultimately becomes your top priority about a week or two after you're done with orientation. So you got a lot to do, but please relax as much as you possibly can.
Yeah, I've made it my mission to learn nothing about medicine before we class up. All right, hey, for all you guys watching, any questions you have, please drop them in the chat and we'll be able to get to them. So next one, if I'm on a wait list for 2026 entry, what should I do now?
Well, so if you're on a wait list and you haven't gotten an offer, there's no guarantee that you're going to get an offer between now and when a school actually, starts orientation. But there is always that chance, and depending on whatever program you're in, medicine, dentistry, vet, whatever else have you, there's always a story that an admissions officer has about the last minute offer that goes out even after orientation starts to a student that's on a wait list. So I suppose if you want to, quote, get ready, you can get ready. I know a lot of admissions offices are not really willing to tell you anything about your waitlist position. They might maybe signal to a handful of you that you should be on deck. I like to talk about being on deck like you are in baseball. You could actually be called to the plate and get an offer, depending on who shows up or doesn't show up for orientation, or if people drop out during orientation, which happens. And certainly in this era where we are, we have a lot of doubts about our ability to pay for medical school or health professions programs. you just kind of never know. So, if you have a pretty good idea of the school where you are waitlisted, and I'm assuming it's one, if you have more than one, narrow it down to one. Your absolute must-have choice, your top priority of your waitlists, and just do what you can to, one, reapply, and two, obviously, if you feel that you have a signal saying you're going to probably get an offer, I don't know if they'll give you a signal or not, but do the best that you can. But of course, if you don't have an offer, you have to focus on a reapplication. You use the similar timeline. Don't just wait and wait and wait until you're, quote, late again, even if you submit in July, you're not really that late. But still, please do whatever you possibly can to just be ready, do a reapplication, and just get going. And I know we'll probably cover a lot of those questions in this talk.
Yeah, for what it's worth, I had a pretty good idea. I was getting off a wait list, and between then and getting off the wait list didn't help my nerves at all. So do better than me, guys. All right. Next question. What advice would you give a reapplicant about submitting their application before they know they're getting an offer?
So this always happens. It's happened every single year, and I know it will continue to happen every year from here on outward. So many of you are probably preparing reapplications and still anticipating an offer from a school off a wait list. Look, if you submit a reapplication and then after you send in your money, for whatever fortuitous chance, an offer comes your way, you spent the money, you might as well go to the school that you're offered to. You kind of lose a little bit of the money that you spent just sort of sending in an application anyway, but you're going to medical school or whatever school that you happen to have been accepted to. Drop everything and go. And I think that's the major thing that I would tell people is, unless you're accepted, you go through the reapplication process, get as much feedback as you can to know what areas need to be improved about your primary application, possibly your secondary application, and just kind of go from there. For many schools, you've had since March to ask if schools are willing to share any insights about your application personally in order for you to prepare a reapplication. So many other people who are reapplicants have already done that work. There's still also time for you to sign up for the various virtual fairs as a reapplicant. The ADIA's virtual dental school recruitment fair is coming up this week. I believe it's on the 20th. AAMC's AMCAS recruitment fair is coming up the first week in June. ACOMAS's is coming up in the middle of June as well. So you have all those virtual events that are coming up. So if you haven't signed up and you haven't done any networking, probably should do that. Just even if you sent your application earlier, you just kind of never know one way or another about that. So be as prepared as you can. But if you get a surprise and you get an offer, congratulations, drop it and get ready to go as quickly as you possibly can.
Yeah, absolutely. AMCAS has a box that you check if you've turned down an acceptance. You don't want to check that box ever. All right. Any questions you guys have? Again, put them in the chat, please, and we will be able to get to them. And next, is it too late to apply for a post-bac or special master's program?
So I think one of the things that is really important is that in the application process, a lot of people who may have gotten seats to post-bacs or special master's programs may have gotten offers from one of their schools that they've been waitlisted for example. So applying to a post-bac or special master's program, if you're talking about February or March, was kind of a safety net. And so, those are seats that if those individuals will not take because they got accepted to school, then those seats become available. So one of the things is that post-bac and special master's programs are constantly still in the process of reviewing applications, even through this period during the summer. So unlike the other application process for med school, dental school, or whatever have you, post-bac and special master's programs very rarely get to capacity. And even if they do get to capacity, they may have a wait list of their own, anticipating that many of the people that they have admitted might get offers someplace else or may decide to drop it and do something else entirely. So I don't think it's too late to apply to postbac or special master's programs, but just get in contact with those program directors, see if they are still accepting applications just in case, and just do whatever you can. If you really feel that those are appropriate for what you're looking for, make sure it matches your goals. It makes sure that you can fulfill whatever requirements you can. And if it happens to be residential and you're not at all close to the school, you're going to need to start making plans if you get accepted in how you're going to wind up moving to that new location. So just ask is the usual answer, but surprisingly, it's not too late to apply.
Sounds good. So a question we have from Drew Dash, I'm not going to read all that. Good evening. How will med schools look at a master's in biology, even if a MCAT score stayed the same year to year?
So I'm going to presume that we're talking about a master's in biology, which is a typical academic master's. So it's not a special master's program. It's sort of a research or a kind of a quasi-research degree in biology. Now, the MCAT score, first of all, doesn't completely matter if you're talking about if the MCAT score stayed from year to year. I don't know if the insinuation on the MCAT score, if you can provide more details and comments, we really would appreciate it. I'm assuming you're talking about maybe, let's just say hypothetically, are you talking like a 506 and maybe you retook it again, you got a 507, you took a 506, then you went with your master's program, and then you retook the MCAT and you got a 507. So I think first of all, again, holistic review is in play. How these scores and these marks are sort of evaluated in context is going to be really important. And I don't know if I can articulate on behalf of all medical schools about how we look at a master's in biology. It depends on what your previous record is. I don't know if by taking a master's in biology, it gives you more access to graduate level biomedical science coursework, or maybe it's something else. It totally depends on what you got out of it and how you present that information in an application. So again, I know this is I probably didn't hit your details, so please feel free, put in another comment, provide additional details so that maybe we can give a little bit more specific advice that is helpful for you as well as for other people in your situation.
Okay, so a follow-up, what about a 498? You got to retake it. That's not going to work.
I'm sorry. As I said, if your aspiration is for medical school, and I mean MD or DO, you should retake your 498. Now, if you are quote desperate and any sort of health professional degree where you get the conferred a degree of doctor is on top of it, podiatry schools are definitely still in the game, and that would be something you would consider if you got a 498. I'm sure there are some DO schools that would also consider you with the 498, albeit you need to have a really, really strong academic record so that you're not thought of as a failure risk. But a 498 in general, if you can really push that up to over 500 for a lot of schools, that is important in terms of psychology on whether you're prepared for medical school. But again, podiatry, maybe some DO schools, that is probably a little bit more probable, but the whole of your entire application needs to is important and will be evaluated.
Okay, another question. There are a certain number of years that certain schools consider prereq courses to expire. Would you have any insight on if a master's program will be able to override that expiration on prereq?
So obviously, my first answer to any such question about coursework and acceptability of coursework or quote expiration is to first of all make sure you ask the admissions team. So again, we have upcoming virtual fairs. If you have a specific question, make sure you ask them or set up an individual appointment with them, because clearly we're going to want to know what your whole transcript says. And if you're, say, a certain number of years, are we talking like 5 years or are we talking about 15 years? So some schools have an expiration sort of preference that the courses need to be taken within a 5 to 10 year period. depending on the school. Other schools are very happy that if you took this master's in biology, you fulfill what you will be what they are looking for, which are content competencies. And there are a lot of schools that do content competencies instead of explicit courses, prerequisite courses that you have to fill out. So this is back to your homework. This is back to your networking. And so if you're doing a master's program and that master's program in, I presume, biology, if does that satisfy, or any admissions committee or anybody, faculty on the admissions committee, that you're somehow or another, by taking these master's courses, you're getting yourself back and acclimated to, rigorous college coursework, or at a graduate level, they may be willing to take it, provided it's their policy to be able to consider it. So again, ask the schools individually. You have those virtual fairs that are coming up. You also obviously can email them if they are responsive. We'll see if they are during this period of time. But save your questions for sure for actual, for the actual admissions recruiters that you want to talk to about that.
Yeah, I always talk to the programs. All right. If my school combines lecture and lab and doesn't specify the lab component, how will the schools know, other than seeing that the class is a 4-credit class? You're generally able to specify that within your secondaries, and you'll have a chance to say it.
So I think, I don't know exactly how you enter your courses into your central application service, whether it's AMCAS, ACOMAS, TMDSAS, ADSAS, VIMCAS, all of that sort of stuff. So first of all, the first pass is, of course, you've got to mark it at least the way that the registrar marks your course. So if you have those options and you can designate lecture and lab together, that's fantastic. That's great. Otherwise, you have to go with what the registrar says. Now, in terms of how would schools know, there's this, I wouldn't call it a secret, but there kind of is a general rule of thumb that if there are any questions about a course that's taken, we will go to your university's course catalog. We will look for a syllabus for that course, and or we might ask your pre-health advising office or department at the school to see if you can give us an answer about, how did you organize your biology class? Why is it 4 or 5 credits? In some cases, I've seen organic chemistry be a big block of 5 credits. And obviously there's, probably if you were to divvy it up as separate courses, either 3 or 4 credits go to lecture and 1 or 2 credits go to lab. It doesn't totally matter as long as it is officially documented by the university and by the department that holds the course. So we will find out, because, we can actually make those calls. And hopefully there's somebody, at least on the other side of the internet, on their website, or a course catalog, online course catalog, or even the professor's website, if you have that, or if we can find it. Your department should be able to post the syllabus, and we should be able to find that out.
Yeah, I think it was like only on a couple of secondaries where I entered coursework, there was a box check that was like lecture and lab combined. So it's a known thing. I wouldn't worry too much about it. All right. Next question. I'm applying in the 2026-2027 cycle. What generally should I be doing when? Well, there's a lot you should have already done.
So we've been putting a lot of reports out on what past successful applicants have been doing and when they've been doing it. So I encourage you, if you get a chance, to go through a lot of our old articles about timing, how timing really plays an important part in your acceptance into at least medical school. And you can kind of see that we're in that block of time right now where everyone is just getting acclimated to your central application service. TMDSAS has already opened up, AMCAS has opened up, but you're not ready to submit yet. ACOMAS has been up for a while, ADSAS has been up, and so forth from there. So I think one of the things, if you're talking about now, for sure, if you can't send money out at this point, you really need to make sure you acclimate yourself with your central application service, how you input your grades. Hopefully, you basically copy exactly what is documented on your transcript. You probably have an unofficial transcript, which is fine in my opinion, but there you will hear a lot of other admissions officers say you really need to use your actual unofficial, your an unofficial transcript, but it's the official one that's on the security paper and so forth sent to you, and you need a document off of the official transcript, whatever that happens to be. So that takes the longest amount of time. So does making sure you process and do your request for transcripts. Don't obviously have the transcripts be sent, and I'm sure the registrars themselves will not send out transcripts until all final grades are reported at this point. So just make sure that everything is in play. Your references have the whatever links or whatever portal instructions they need to upload their letters. This is the period of time where this is a go period, and you've got to coordinate with everybody who's going to help you submit a completed application, especially in the areas where you have no control. So that's what you should be doing at this particular point. When you make your school list, you should figure out if you need to or should have enough reason to sign up for taking a situational judgment test like Casper or Preview. We have reports about, what the threshold number seems to be for the number of students that would feel compelled to take Casper or feel compelled to take Preview, whether it's required or recommended or whatever else. So we have a little bit of data that suggests on that, but you have to make your decision based on your own list. So you've got to do that, plan the money for that. And of course, you need to be as well rested as possible when secondary applications start rolling in, usually within a couple of weeks to 4 weeks after you finally push go or submit on your primary application. So, the month of July is going to be really, really busy, depending on how many schools that you apply to. I hope you've already outlined or pre-written your essay responses based on some of the secondary essay prompts that we know have existed from last year. We don't expect too many prompts to change significantly, but you have to still be prepared in case they do. The famous ones will probably roll out their prompts in their own time, probably by mid-July. I'm looking at you, Duke. It's one of my examples. I love the Duke reveal of the secondary essay questions that they love to write. They love to challenge their applicants with. It's almost as big as the NFL schedule reveal from earlier this week. So, and I know it causes a pretty nice little run of discussions on our forums, and I'm sure a lot of other places too. So, just be prepared for that, and you're gonna just be overloaded with deadlines, and you just have to hit whatever your timeline is for submitting all those secondaries in the month of July into August. So at least your completed application gets fully considered for an interview, and that's all we can ask you to do. And then you wait.
Yeah, a lot of waiting. Yeah, seconding, pre-write your secondaries. I didn't do that. I got mine in a little later. It worked out, but I wouldn't recommend it at all. Do the opposite of what I did. All right. As a reapplicant, how much of a red flag is it if I keep some portion of my personal statement similar to last year? My passion, mission for the profession is the same. It's recommended I change things.
Well, so my suggestion to anybody who's reapplying is that practically every admissions officer that I know, whether it's medicine, dentistry, veterinary medicine, pharmacy, you name it, across the board for most of the health professions admissions officers that I know, we all will say the same thing, which is you can't submit the exact same personal statement from last year. So to what extent could you change your personal statement so it's not as similar to last year? My usual suggestion is if you are a reapplicant, at least tell us what you did that it contributes to your thesis of your mission and passion to the profession that is germane for some activity you did in the interim year. While you were applying, there's some activity or some new experience or vignette that you collected within the period of time after you submitted previously last year. So make sure you talk about what you've done most recently and some event that that at least further solidifies your passion and vision and purpose as a future healthcare professional. I would always say, please make sure you put that in here. Secondly, make sure you have as many people, not quite like maybe not a dozen people, but a good number of like 4 or 5 people who you really know you can get very solid, very transparent, very critical advice about your writing. And you really want these people to help you see if the way you wrote your personal statement can we improve it so that more people can pay attention to it, so they know you're the type of student that they want in their class. How are you able to express yourself? So there's a lot of things that, depending on what you write, it's gonna really dictate how you could rewrite your personal statement. And quite frankly, there are a lot of strong applicants that I have worked with and that I've advised. They have enough vignettes, stories, reflections. They could really write 3 different personal statements if they really wanted to, depending and focusing on different aspects or competencies or purposes that they want to make sure they want anybody on the admissions team to know about them as a future member of the medical school class or a future alum of their medical school. So please make sure you take advantage of whatever resources you have available. We have personal statement volunteer readers that are available on Student Vector Network, certainly on the med side and the vet side. And obviously we have expert advice on call, where I definitely get to give a little bit of feedback of what things you can do to sort of revamp and retool your personal statement and the rest of your primary application, your working activities, descriptions, other impactful experiences, to really get a better picture of how qualified you are when it comes to the pre-professional competencies and how clearly you really talk about your mission or passion to the profession. So get a lot of advice and just be humble about the possibility of making, some pretty significant structural changes, because, whatever you wrote the last time, I don't know if it was good enough for you to get interviews, but for those for whom you didn't have no interviews or very, very weird bad luck with interviewing, you probably need to really consider a wholesale change.
Okay, another question here is: submitting before June 1st on AMCAS a big advantage? Last year I was behind submitting in July. I had over 400 college credits listed. Well, earlier is better as long as you have a dialed in personal statement and all that stuff.
I think there's a lot of anecdotal evidence, and I think depending on I listen to a lot of pre-health advisors, and whatever their observations are, seeing their groups of a few dozen applicants that they shepherd and they oversee and monitor their applications, there is clearly a very, the timing part is extremely important. Not necessarily before June 1st, but certainly, as I mentioned to everybody, July 1st, or certainly before July 1st, depending on what your application service is a really important timeline. And for whatever reason, this last year, this past cycle, we had a big, long delay in verifying applications. I mean, it really expanded, very, very quickly to like 4 to 6 weeks, a little bit earlier than what we're usually accustomed to. You can figure that out. You can look at the AMCAS tracker that we have on our website, or at least you can link off of the SDN homepage, and you can kind of see what the AMCAS tracker has said over the last few years about, how long it takes an application that is submitted on a certain date to get verified. And so and the verification point's important because that's where your official application GPAs are therefore calculated and verified to all the schools. So prior to that, it's just your entry of your courses, but the verification process calculates and determines your GPAs. So the longer it takes for them to process your GPAs, obviously then the more nervous you're going to be. So that's probably the advantage that I think everyone has, is making sure you submit your application so that the verification time is as minimal as possible. Therefore, that's why at least you'll hear a lot of people talk about, I talk about July 1st through July 4th, because you can remember what July 4th is. Other people will cite a little bit earlier in time by like the 21st of June, which is of course summer solstice, or maybe even slightly earlier, depending on who you talk to. So just make sure that, the month of June is certainly the real very, very important month where you want to make sure you can submit as soon as you possibly can. Now, I don't know about the 400 college credits, and therefore, if you have that many college credits, this is the time to actually start inputting all of those courses in. And I feel for you, because if you're AMCAS, if you're AMCAS, you're probably entering all the courses in yourself every single year. If you were on a liaison CAS system like ADSAS, I believe ACOMAS is on one, VIMCAS is on a liaison CAS, they actually will roll over your course entry every year. There is also an option that they do what they call professional transcript entry, meaning you pay somebody on the liaison side to enter your courses for you. I wouldn't recommend it unless you happen to have over 400 college credits on your transcript. So AMCAS doesn't do that. So I feel for you, but you got to put in the work to put in all those grades.
Yeah, I submitted before July to AMCAS, and it took 1 day shy of 7 calendar weeks for my application to get verified. So hopefully it goes a little quicker this year. All right. Next question. I intend to submit my application now and send updates to my schools, but I heard schools don't always take updates. What should I do?
Good question. First, make sure you check with the schools on your list whether they take updates or don't. A lot of schools are very explicit that they don't take updates. Some of them are very explicit in by saying the only way we take updates is if you log onto our application portal and you submit a message, and you're limited to like 1 or 2 messages or 1 update, a file update or whatever. So you need to know, and ultimately you will find out for each school that you have on your list how each school will manage or accept updates. Follow the instructions. That's a really I don't think I can underscore that. This is a follow the instructions process, and any deviation from following the instructions can be used against you when it comes to a final decision, especially if you repeatedly try to quote break the rules or try to see if there's an exception to the rules here and there. So please make sure that you know what the update process is about. So that said, don't think that sending updates is going to really help you get any additional consideration. Remember that a lot of schools get thousands of applications that they have to sort through, read, and kind of file through if you get an update or something like that. So each admissions office should have its own process that you may or may not know about on how they handle updates. But just because you send them an update doesn't mean, if we were going to go back to paper files, that, okay, we're going to pull your file, we're going to put it back on the top stack so we could look at it. I mean, if that were the case, everybody would be sending updates all the time and it would be mass chaos in the admissions office. We don't want that. So be very strategic in the type of updates that you give. I think one of the times that people certainly would give updates would be on the completion of a semester's worth of courses. So if you're going to give us an update, an academic update, say at the end of your fall term, that's probably a reasonable time to do that. Anything up probably in the interim between then, just ask, see if they would accept an update, say during the summer, if you are not taking courses but you're involved in some activity. You're just going to need to ask them what the procedures are about that, and plan strategically. Again, not every school is going to want updates at the same time or the same way. So you really have to be on the ball to know which schools you want to prioritize and update those schools.
Yeah, follow the instructions. I can't be stressed enough. Absolutely don't deviate from the instructions. It's not easy, but they make it it's clear. All right, so can you expand on the idea of mission fit, dental school specific a little more? I get that some schools want applicants with a lot of service, some want research, etc. Is it deeper than that? And conveniently, we have a question that we queued up. How important is mission fit? And it's very important, guys.
Yeah, so thank you for asking that question. And I will take this little time to talk to all my dental school applicants that are out there, because the message is still very similar for med school applicants as well, but certainly for dental school, I'll try to make sure that I address the question for you specifically. Now, most dental schools, just like most medical schools, have a mission. in terms of what types of students their program wants to produce regarding future dentists, future physicians. If you read the vision statements and the mission statements of any of these programs, you're going to realize that they basically want everything. We want the people who can do research well. We want people who can be innovators. We want people who can really care for underserved populations. All this sort of stuff. It's like a big, huge wish list. Like you were a little kid and you wanted tons and tons of things from Santa Claus or whatever mythological person you believe in during winter holiday. So that's what mission and vision statements sound like, and that's really what they do. The only people that really should pay attention to mission and vision statements are the lawyers that talk to each other, that write them up, because they want to convince the donors and politicians that this is what we're here for. So what's important is not necessarily the school's mission, even though you do have to pay attention to that. I like to tell people that if you're interested in dental school, for dental school, please understand the one important thing that every dental school wants to do is they want to train you to be a general dentist. They want to train you to have the hand skills, hopefully the business acumen, and the science that you need in order for you to be a well-trained general dentist. And that's the main goal. So everybody who wants to be a general dentist, you at least need to make sure you pay homage to that fact. Now, in terms of mission fit, pay very close attention to where the students are practicing dentistry. And I mean outside the dental school clinic. I'm going to give you an example. I live in Northeast Ohio. The newest dental school is at Northeast Ohio Med, so Neomed Batante College of Dentistry. They have a very specific mission, and it is shown by the way that they train their dentists, especially in the clinical years, where a lot of the opportunities that those third and fourth year dental students have is to work in various community clinics around the eastern part of Ohio, especially near the Appalachian Mountains. So they are specifically trying to train students to be very good practitioners in rural or very geographically underserved areas. So pay close attention to what your schools are doing, where students are deployed, what type of specialties are available, and try to figure out for yourself how well does your participation in that school prepare you for what your next step actually is. The research stuff is important for those who need the research to advance to some specialty, oral maxillofacial surgery or something like that. But not everybody is able to do research because your primary goal is to get the hand skills to work in dentistry in their dental clinics. So keep that in mind. Most of the schools are going to be very much interested in keeping people close to home, however home is defined, whether it's their own state or their own part of the state within some reasonable geographic distance. Now, that doesn't mean that if you wind up going to one school, you can't find some sort of residency or general practice residency far flung away from where that school is. That's still very much possible. And you just need to find the schools that have a good track record in having you do that. But you've got to be very specific in terms of what you want to do as a dentist and how you want to be trained in terms of the overall skills and competencies that you need. And what does that school offer, especially extracurricularly, sometimes within their curriculum, to give you that type of experience that you are looking for. So if you really, really want to work with special needs patients in dentistry, there's a really good need for that. So find out how each school helps you train as a general dentist to work with special needs patients. Ask that question because if that's what you want to do, because you did Special Olympics, you work for the Disability Services Office, all that other stuff, hopefully your experiences will really underscore the fact that you really are interested in that subpopulation of underserved patients. That's how I would tell you to really, as an example, on really looking and focusing on mission fit as it pertains to dental school admissions. And I hope by extension, all of you who are applying to med school also learn that importance too by that example. Okay, I think you're muted, Kyle. Sorry.
Yeah, technology is confusing. Mission fit's very important. Yeah, can't stress that enough.
Can't say
All
more.
right. So, what is the concern with using PTE for transcript entry? Is it accuracy? I don't even know what that is.
So that's the professional transcript entry for liaison cast. And I don't think there's a concern other than the fact that you just have to pay more money for somebody to do work. So for me, if you only have one transcript, you could do the work, save the money. Don't why are you paying somebody else to do it? If you're a non-traditional student and you have a number of different transcripts, military, if you went to military schools and stuff forth like that, all of this like wider range of like 7 or 8 different transcripts, and it's going to take you a lot of time. Again, the earlier call was 400 credit hours. That's 100-ish classes that you're going to have to put into manually into your application service. If you have a professional transcript entry, hopefully you're paying somebody to put that in there for you more accurately than you would if you had to do it yourself. And because you have that many more transcripts and that many more classes, there's always that additional risk that you're going to make a mistake. And you don't want to make more than a certain number of mistakes. Applications have been sent back to people because you made too many mistakes in your course entry. You don't want that, because then they unsubmit your application. You got to resubmit it again, and that whole bother and trouble puts you a little bit further behind in the queue. Schools are going to know that your original entry was wrought with mistakes, so that could be used against you. Again, a lot of different things, and so that's why professional transcript entry is an option for the liaison CAS applicant. So dental, ACOMAS, VIMCAS, all those, everybody except for, all I know, TMDSAS and AMCAS, because I don't believe either of them are on the liaison system. So if you that's what I would tell you is that's why I would consider PTE the professional transcript entry. But if you only have one transcript or two, you don't need to spend the money. I think you could do it yourself.
Yeah, I had a whole bunch of stuff to include military transcripts, and it's not fun, but it's doable. It's not that bad. All right, next question. Is there a right time and method to ask admissions if they're willing to do a review of last year's application to suggest improvements? Most programs will tell you in your decision letter, in my experience, whether they do that or not. They're pretty upfront about that.
Yeah. So, and I think, the sad part is, if you've been kind of strung along or ghosted along the way as an applicant from this past cycle, I wish we could do better than like leaving you in the lurch like that. All I can say is probably the best time is, the months of February, March, April, May, the few months that you have time to actually craft a reapplication and reconstruct a new personal statement, whatever else have you. It's just that, admissions offices are not always available and not always well staffed to be able to give that type of individualized advice. There are a few that do. I can think of at least a couple of schools that say, oh yeah, sure, you could schedule a 10-minute web call, and we can try to answer whatever questions that you have, and whatever we are able to disclose to you, if we are able to, about your application review, we'll try and give you some advice one way or another. Otherwise, as many of you probably know, there is the generic advice. If you didn't get an interview, then obviously something you need to look at is your MCAT, or whatever your test scores are, the GPA, whatever, how you describe your work and activities, all that other stuff. The generic advice would fortunately or unfortunately still apply to you. I also am, again, big fan of networking, and so with the upcoming virtual fairs, you can ask them. But I'm pretty sure that now that the application cycle has begun, they will not be so willing to review old applications and suggest improvements. Really, the best time would have been before the cycle starts.
Okay. Next question. Is it too late to contact admissions officers as a 2026, 2027 applicant? I would assume no, because we're just kicking off.
We're just kicking off, and there's a reason why all these virtual fairs are being scheduled for, at least, as I said, ADSAS, the dental schools. There's coming up, I think, on the 20th of May. The medical schools, again, the MD programs are coming up in early and mid-June. Any other program that might be out there, just keep your ears open, whatever AVMC for VimCast says or anybody else. All these virtual fairs are there for a reason. A lot of times, even the admissions offices will still have some sort of recruitment events and maybe even have a little webinar series to keep students engaged throughout the process. I know that was the case certainly a little bit earlier before the cycle started, where ACOMAS and ADSAS and AMCAS all had sort of like these webinar account, get enthusiastic, pump, get yourself pumped and get ready for the application cycle to open. Again, kind of like the schedule release for the NFL that happened this week. And so that had already happened, but I'm sure many of those webinars are still available. You can still access them, I presume, YouTube or Vimeo is what AAMC likes to use, although they will transfer a lot of their videos to YouTube as well. So, presumably admissions officers' emails are still available, and as a 26, 27 applicant, just mind that they probably have their preferences at this point about how you contact them. Again, you could try email, but I'm sure many of them will ultimately prefer that you talk to them during these formal events like these virtual fairs, or, once you finally apply and you are given permission to set up some sort of applicant account on their application management portal, then you can probably send them messages there as, following whatever their policy is about updates or communication. So it's not too late. But you got to know what you want to ask, and hopefully, again, because those fairs are available up until at least the first part of the year, until interview season really starts, in theory they are still open for questions.
All right. So another question here: is it acceptable to follow up with a waitlist school during summer months? And does having a letter of intent on file change the frequency of communication? If you've got a letter of intent and they know you want to go there, you don't really need to bother them. I shouldn't have said bother, but
I presume if you already sent, I assume if you send a letter of intent, they know. What would you ask them? Waitlist school during the summer months? Again, it's one of those very difficult things. I really would say if you have no offers and you're on a wait list, they know you're on a wait list, or they may still ask you if you still want to stay on the wait list. That type of communication will still likely continue. So if you follow up, but they'd already sent you a survey whether you want to stay on the wait list, it's kind of, I don't know if that's necessary. It's a little bit of a redundant action that you would take. So again, it's one of those very difficult things that it's on the burden of the admissions office to communicate with you. If they really know that you're on deck, as I say, you have a pretty good likelihood of getting moved off the wait list, it should be their responsibility to forewarn you ahead of time. And granted, it's no guarantee that you will get off the wait list. It's just saying it is, your likelihood of getting off the wait list and getting a seat in the class is pretty good, without actually giving you a number or anything else like that. So I would certainly say this is one of those situations where ultimately admissions offices are just going to say, don't call us, we'll call you. And that's pretty much what's going to happen during the summer, because they are very busy with trying to get orientation done and making sure their class is full to whatever the capacity is planned on, all the way through orientation.
Yeah, if they want you, they're going to let you know. Hurry up and wait, unfortunately. All right. This is a good one. Where can I find someone to critique my application before I send it, which is something you 100% should do?
Well, I hope you've been planning and been building this, I hope, circle of reviewers or editors, or at least people who I would call your accountability partners throughout this whole process. Like, you definitely had it by January or February, almost like at the same time you were trying to collect the identities of those who are going to be writing your letters of reference. Yeah. So, if you haven't, you probably can still find some people The internet has always been available. Again, SDN, we have our collection of verified experts. We have a lot of volunteers that are very willing to give you feedback on your personal statement if they are not overloaded or busy themselves. We have expert advice on call where I can also do that type of critique. Obviously, the clock is ticking, and there's probably a lot of other places you can find people online. There's certainly people you could probably pay who could be willing to, critique your essays if you paid them. And I'm pretty sure they're all probably pretty busy at this time of the year too. So, there's plenty of places that you can look for people to critique your application. But if you were on the ball very early on, you probably have already reached out to various nonprofit organizations that help with applicant review, possibly even MCAT or test prep. And they were recruiting since fall semester last year. So if you don't have that type of accountability group, get one as soon as you can, and you'd be amazed if you have people who are really honest with you about what things you need to improve upon, and hopefully do it in an affirmative type of way. Now is better than never.
All right. Got another question from the chat. Any suggestions on pre-writing secondaries? We got into this a little bit earlier. In a secondary, it's inadvisable to base a response on an activity we use for a most meaningful activity in AMCAS. Yeah, I can actually answer this one. Start the moment you have your personal statement dialed in, you're good to go. Go on the Student Doctor Network forums. You can just search online. You can find the secondary prompts. Some programs have the secondary prompts on their websites. And with respect to using something that's already most meaningful on your AMCAS application, just don't repeat yourself. If it's most meaningful, you're probably going to have different elements of it and different stories that you can tell that relate to the mission of the program and how to communicate what you've done and why you're a good fit to continue going and doing that and enhancing their student population.
Yeah, I can't add too much more. The secondary essay prompts are in a lot of different places in SDN, whether it's in our forums. I know we're revamping a little bit of our school database, so we will also include some of the secondary prompts as we know them into that database once it's ready to, the newer version is ready to launch. Obviously, you probably can search, the internet, whether it's the school's own website and they're willing to share it, or a lot of other people will share, their commentary and their strategies on how they interpret a good response to be for various secondaries. Again, there's a lot of advice out there on the internet. So, there's certainly a lot of suggestions you can take. We have articles about how you should pre-write your secondaries. So please go to SDN and look up the article for pre-writing secondaries.
All right, perfect. So another one of our questions we have here: what can I do to make sure I get an offer for the 2027 incoming class? Long and short of it, unless you already are completing your Bachelor's of Science at the one school that has the BS to MD program, not really any options.
I think we've kind of alluded to the fact, and there are, again, articles that I've written that are on SDN in the archives. There's a lot you can do to make sure you get an offer, but there's no ironclad guarantee unless you have an articulation agreement interview, and hopefully don't blow that. But to get an offer for the 27 incoming class, clearly you need to make sure you know what your mission and purpose is as a physician and how it matches the schools that you're applying to. Your school list is your greatest determinant of whether you're going to get into medical school. So please be very deliberate and focused on why each school on your list is going to make you the type of doctor you ultimately want to be. At the very minimum, be the type of candidate for a residency that you want to be, because residency applications aren't too far away once you get into medical school, and everyone's going to be concerned about that. So what activities do you need in order for you to do well in the match, and that program directors are going to really value who you are and your training and your other insights about the profession. So understand what you need from each of the schools that you've put on your list, don't just go by name and prestige and certainly resources. That has obviously your top school is going to have all the resources, and that's why they're there. But you don't necessarily need to be shooting for that if you're outside the usual scope of their metrics one way or another. The mission fit is very, very important, and really showing that you would be better than just a happy student at that school. You would really thrive there, and you'd be somebody that they would be more than proud to recommend for a residency that you are very competitive for. So just keep that in mind. And obviously, as I think we mentioned before, other things to make sure you get an offer for the class, be prepared. Be prepared for interviews, follow instructions when it comes to answering questions on secondaries. Make sure you turn around your secondaries within whatever, we like to tell people 1 to 2 weeks or whatever the timeline is that the school imposes upon you, whatever the deadline is. Pay attention to all of that. And if you do, that also will help you get that offer.
Yeah, for what it's worth, like I took more than 2 weeks for my secondary for where I'm going to be matriculating. It's possible, but I cannot stress enough, do all that stuff ahead of time. Like I had a very bad time. I don't want you to have a bad time like I did. Learn from my numerous mistakes. All right, so for a student, is the goal of attending a virtual fair only to get responses to specific questions, or is it helpful to attend for an applicant to raise their profile? A little bit of both. How good are you at talking to people and networking? Are you able to speak to somebody from the program one-on-one, get their contact information, get an invite to follow up with them? How good are your interpersonal skills in that respect?
The goal of attending a virtual fair is whatever your goal happens to be. Now, obviously, if you have specific questions, then your goal is to get the responses to the questions. But if your goal there is to try to raise your profile, there's plenty of times where people attend virtual fairs and they, basically sabotage their profile. I'll just put it that way. I can tell you the number of times I've been to virtual fairs and I would have a few people basically only asking what's your average GPA and MCAT score. I mean, come on, guys. That's the only question you have to ask everybody. So, we get depending on what questions you ask, we get a good idea of exactly what type of engaged applicant you really are. And sometimes if you aren't prepared, you can really undermine your chances. So please, if you are attending a virtual fair, do your homework, have specific questions, and don't ask questions that can be easily gleaned from the internet or off of a Gen AI search.
Yeah, most programs have those stats on their sites. All right. As a non-trad student with many years since undergrad, are any award scholarships from undergrad still relevant and appropriate?
That's a good question. I do think Dean's List, you probably don't need to say that. But if you got something like, hey, a Rhodes Scholarship, something really big and national, international, or something like that, maybe you would consider that. If you happen to be a Div 1 athlete and you were All-American, yeah, go for it. I mean, I would list that. There's a certain, I think the recognitions that are certainly nationally recognizable, if you got them as an undergrad, I would consider including it. But certainly as a non-traditional student, you do want to focus on what you've done most recently, rather than the Heisman Trophy that you won 12 years ago. So put everything in perspective as if you were applying for a job. What are things that you would want to make sure on your resume that are most important? And then maybe those other awards that are worth sort of mentioning that are recognizable with the standard that I just mentioned. Maybe put that in there just to make it really cool that you can have something to talk about in a sidebar traditional interview or something like that.
Okay, makes sense to me. So we're running up on our time here. So one last question. If I wanted an expert advice on call session, what should I share before the meeting? That is a really good question.
So we here at the Health Professional Student Association, the publishers of Student Doctor Network for the last few years, we do expert advice on call, which is designed to be donor supported and is an opportunity for people, if you have questions about your application or your readiness for a health professions career, you have me as your pre-health advisor that can hopefully set up a virtual appointment like this, and we can answer whatever questions that you have. For the most part, I can, at least this period of time, we have a lot of people asking about, your personal statement, how do you revise that? And how about work and activities, primary statement type stuff. So I'll just address that because, of course, for other types of questions, it's a little bit different preparation. It really helps to have your old application. It really helps to have your old essays, because I want to know, what did you write before if you're a reapplicant? What did you submit with? How did you write your work and activities back then? Anything that gives me a little bit more insight of where you graduated from, what your degree was, what your GPA was calculated to be. I mean, anything like that to really help is really important. And I strongly prefer that when you make an appointment, there is a box there that says, please share a Google Drive document, a Google Workspace link where you put in all your documents. It can be a folder, it can be certain documents or statements or whatever else like that. So make sure you use that, or at least update it if you do get a chance, with your new information or the information you want me to review in there. I can't completely guarantee that I'll read it well in advance, but I do my very best whenever I do get a call for an appointment to see if I can access the file. But at least let's start from someplace rather than me go completely blind and try to guess. So what was your MCAT score? Where did you apply? Where did you get interviews from? All of that stuff could be easily addressed by bringing stuff in preparation for your appointment. You should already be doing that with your pre-health advisors. In some cases, if you have a reapplication review of your file, you may not need it because hopefully the school has your file. But for anybody else, if you really want personal statement help, please, and you're a reapplicant, show me what you wrote before. Show me what you're writing now, and that really gives me a better idea of how you're trying to improve.
All right, absolutely. Yeah, guys, the link for scheduling a call is in the YouTube chat. Totally recommend it. Help me out, work for me. All right, so Dr. Chuck, thank you for answering those questions. Everybody who contributed to the questions, thank you. Got some really good stuff in there. So hope everybody's been able to get something out of this, and we'll see you all next time.
Wish you all good luck, and hopefully if you have any questions, please set up an appointment.
All right. Have a great night, everyone. Have a great whenever you're watching this.